Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Welcome to today's Grain Market Blast. It is Tuesday, the 5th of August, all day. You join me and the awesome Angie Setzer, where Angie will be providing us a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets. But before she does, I'll get the legals out of the way. Nothing discussed in the space of session, constitute trading or investment advice refers to any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed Angie Setzer. And 1 second, I also forgot to invite her to be co-host. So 1 sec. The invitation is sent. Dun dun dun. Has that worked? You should. There you go. Yeah. Sorry, I've
Yay!
completely messed this up. Wrong set the wrong time. Forgot to invite you to a co-host. Oh God,
This is
what's
what
going on?
happens when you take 2 days off. I don't know what to tell you,
Well, exactly
Ryan.
that.
We didn't do Friday. We didn't do yesterday. You're out of practice. It's okay. I forgive you. I've missed you also. Have you missed me? Of
Oh, I've
course you
missed
have.
you.
That's how was Oasis?
Oasis was very, very good. Thank you for asking.
Did you sing Wonderwall at the top of your lungs just for
Oh, I
me?
sang everything. I sang everything. It was like
You
a
should
giant
have.
karaoke.
Oh, as it should be. But anyway, no one tuned in to listen to our Oasis chat. That's a different spaces at another time. Happy Tuesday, August 5th. You might hear the birds a chirping in the background. I'm coming to you from, I'd say, north central ish Wisconsin, sitting beside a nice little lake. I caught two massive
Oh
fish
yeah,
yesterday.
huge,
They were so big.
huge.
Yeah, just so it was crazy. The fight that they put up, nuts. Check out my page. So, anywho, welcome. I'm playing catch up right along with you, but I figure what the heck? Let's take a break from vacation and touch base on what the hell is happening across the grain space. And so, first things first, you might say I'm going to lead with yield estimates. You'd be wrong. I want to talk about trade. And so, biggest thing that we're looking at right now on the trade side of things, and please feel free to chime in, Ryan, because I've been kind of just watching from 1,000 feet away. But to me, the India thing is one of the bigger surprises. Just
Yeah,
simply because we're trying to. I think we're seeing will tariffs or the threat of tariff sanctions, whatever, work as a geopolitical tool, right? Like, can I, maybe the threat of this will force you to change the way you do business or whatever. And so it's been interesting to see India, who is always or who is said to be a friend of the administration from the start. They were going to be the country that had the first trade deal. It kind of seemed like the attitude of the administration. We're going to have three tranches, right, starting in June and blah blah blah, and then we really haven't gotten there. And now all of a sudden you're seeing a bit of an escalation. And I feel like a lot of people are looking at how the administration is treating India and saying, well, this could happen with China, but it feels like you're really seeing each country being handled very very differently, and even like the conversation surrounding the administration in China on trade, seeing what's going on with India, like they're different. And so that part's interesting. It's almost like two parallel conversations, but obviously, what India is doing is very similar with Russia, excuse me, when looking at the war and things like that, like is very similar to what China's been doing with Russia. They're still working very closely together. There's still, business transactions taking place, oil and things like that. And so to see India kind of push back and be like, yeah, whatever, tariff us then. Like we're not going to change what we're doing. Like the previous administration had told us to do this, yada yada yada. And so I think that's just kind of an interesting sort of dynamic to be
yeah,
watching, especially as we're trying to grasp what happens between the U.S. and China, because it has such massive implications potentially on grain trade. And so thoughts, do you have anything to kind of interject on the India
no, I think
conversation at
just
all?
just
Okay.
for those that aren't kind of fully up to speed, what's happened is Trump and the administration have finally kind of said enough's enough with not only India buying Russian oil, but then going onto the market and reselling it,
Yes.
at the behest of Russia. So yeah, so they finally said, you know what, these sanctions and all everything else aren't working. There you go. We're gonna take a much harder line. But also they have singled out as well the military cooperation that India are increasingly having with Russia as well.
Yes.
Just a side note on tariffs as well, because obviously one kind of bit of a surprise from last week was I think it was it 39% or whatever it was, tariffs on on Switzerland, and
Yes, where'd that come from?
no one could work out exactly where that came from. It
Yeah.
seems to be it's primarily because of the pharmaceutical trade. Obviously, Switzerland is the home to
Oh.
many pharmaceutical companies, but it was Michael Brown said it this morning on today's Morning Blast. I can't remember if it was Trump that said it or one of his senior advisors. When asked why 39, they freely admitted that it was just random. So
That's where
my
the
joke
wheel
about
landed, you
yeah.
guys. Like, what do you
My,
mean, why 39? Why are you asking dumb questions?
So my joke about Trump throwing like darts at a dartboard and then counting up how many they add up to, 39 is probably what you'd expect him to get with
It
three darts. So
works,
yeah, it makes
right?
sense.
And imagine my surprise to find out that Switzerland isn't a part of the EU. I thought it was,
Ah, yeah, there you go.
like, look at me learning things. Not, I should know. You know what I mean? Like, I guess. But
Yeah, no,
anyway,
absolutely.
that part was surprising, and yes, I think there is some random, and then obviously we've had no China confirmation, and so like going back to what I was saying before, this has a massive implication for trade, with the China factor, simply because we're getting closer and closer to the date where you should be seeing transactions start to take place for us when it comes to exporting soybeans into China. And so right now that's the major story, is that China hasn't come in and really bought a bean. There's some unknown purchases or purchases made by unknown, but that's not guaranteed to be China as much as what we like to think it is. And when it comes down to it, how the administration, we haven't had this confirmation on a push. Trump did say today, though, that they're very close to a deal, and as soon as they agree to a deal, he will announce whether or not there'll be a
Yeah,
meeting, because there's talk that Xi's kind of pushing this meeting. You've seen the China state newspapers, kind of both of them, the People's Daily and then the whatever the other one is. Both kind of saying like Trump should come, and so it's like I said, one of those things that we're watching really closely. I think it's important to point out that you are seeing sort of a short squeeze, or cash markets move higher in China right now, on the idea that there is kind of lacking coverage, beyond November through December into January. But every day that goes by that you see China making purchases of soybeans, even if they're small, out of Argentina or Brazil, in what is typically our big window of opportunity, is another day that we lose potentially. Now, the one thing I want to point out that a lot of folks don't tend to kind of recognize when it comes to China purchases these days is that we have had COFCO. They are very much a part of the U.S. grain industry. They have an elevator, on the river. They have the ability to kind of have a general understanding of positioning. I would argue that you probably do have an idea of trade or transactions that are going to take place, ownership, values, things of that nature, that can kind of create this sort of latent reporting that we've seen over the last few years. Like last year, everyone was talking about a lack of business being done, and then all of a sudden we just had these sales come in, and it was basically business that had been put together but not announced. There are some discrepancies there that we've seen that we have to be kind of aware of. But from an overall standpoint, you are starting to see kind of both parties, China and the US, panic a bit. The US more, like you've seen basis in the West back off. I think, you've got the Dakotas and Minnesota harvest bean basis is a buck under in spots, like there's no trains sold. Like, so
yeah,
you've got both sides that are starting to panic. The seller is panicking more than the buyer at this point, because the buyer in China still has, available supply. You've seen record shipments out of Brazil and things like that. And so really how we see this whole entire relationship unfold as we move forward is going to have a massive implication for the overall bean picture. And right now everyone's arguing that we'll have no purchases made by China. I don't think that's possible. I think they're going to have to come in and purchase something, and the rest of the world's also going to have to come in and purchase something. But with the uncertainty that we have over trade and all of these other things, they're very slow to make those purchases. And every day that goes by, is another day that the merchandiser is, kind of like, oh shit, I'm not going to have enough space if I can't start moving this stuff. So definitely something to be paying attention to. That's kind of the trade subject. Anything else to add that you saw that matters? Like, we've seen threats if you don't follow through. We got these pharmaceutical tariffs. I think the biggest thing out of the EU trade deal that I think is important to point out is that they agreed on even the sectoral tariffs going forward are all going to
yeah.
stick at 15%. So that part was interesting, but beyond that, trade is trade. We'll
No,
see where the
it's
administration goes.
it's
So,
yeah. I'm kind of waiting as much as anyone else on this point to see. Yeah, we definitely need more flesh on the bone, and we need to more color. But at the moment, it's and potentially we could get some later on today when he's on CNBC.
Woohoo! I can't wait. I won't be pay I will barely be paying attention.
Kramer and Trump on the TV at the same time.
Oh
Brilliant.
my golly. Yeah, I'll just I'll take to Twitter just to get the highlights of that one. I don't
Yeah,
need to.
same.
My brain is already struggling enough in this environment. So, nextly, I made up a new word. You can have it. You guys start using it. Yield estimates, big chatter right now. Yield estimates. FC Stone came out, or StoneX, excuse me, with their yield number yesterday, 188.1, which is absolutely massive, but also in line with kind of what the conversation has been out of their chief person. I think he's their chief economist, is what Arlen is. Sorry, I should know his title, but I don't. And so it'll be right in line. They've been saying that the market is trading it. The thing about StoneX is they work closely with elevators, end users, cooperatives, things like that. And so they're talking a lot to merchandisers and all of that, who are, hey, this is what we're expecting. This is how we're making plans. This is the time of year as a grain trader where you're kind of like, all right, if it's this yield locally based on what things look like, this is what I'm looking at. I kind of jokingly, like as one of my bullet points, put choose your fighter, agronomist versus merchandiser, because right now I'm getting two very different conversations, and I'm not arguing, you know what I mean, like I'm not arguing on anything at this point, because I don't know, and it's early and that no one else truly does. But I think we have to kind of pedal with a little bit of caution, simply because the people that I am talking to, that I trust, that I lean on, that are out working with farmers to help produce a big crop, their number one goal is to be like, look at me, my agronomic insights help to really maximize yield on these acres and things. They're kind of saying, hey, it is a good crop. Don't get us wrong. It is a good crop, but I don't know if it's as record as what people want it to be. There's talk of early denting in corn. So basically the crop is beginning to finish earlier than what you would like to see. That tends to lead to lighter kernel weight, which tends to lead to less kernels, and you know what I mean? Like, it takes more kernels to make a bushel. These types of things that we have to be paying attention to. I do think the potential is there, and it really varies. Like for me, it depends on, who I'm talking to, where they're located, obviously what type of weather they've seen, when they got planted, yada, yada, yada. But I do think, really, as we work our way through August, you're probably going to see the highest yield estimates of the crop. Like the optimism is at its greatest point. But obviously, we'll see. We'll learn more here over the next few weeks as we get more in the way of crop tours underway and things like that. But if this crop, if there is corn that's denting across the corn belt and in some of these important spots, you're going to get harvest results here in another few weeks or whatever. And so we'll be watching this closely. I really want to point out that the NAS update next week, Tuesday's update, is farmer survey driven. And I don't know many farmers. Like, there are a lot of optimistic farmers out there, but I haven't really talked to, and granted, farmers they are optimistic, but they also tend to have a little bit of pessimism in them when it comes to estimating crop size, in August, because they've been burnt before. I don't have any of my growers that are like, oh yeah, I'm outpacing a record tremendously.
Right.
And so I think we have to be really careful, like, to see some of these yield numbers and think that they're guaranteed. But at the same time, to myself, we have to be really careful to see the, like, not to ignore them, or not to say that they are completely impossible, because they are being driven by, surveys and data and things like that. And so we'll definitely be watching. And the biggest thing I want to point out too is that the number next week will include FSA data. And so I feel like that's the sleeper surprise potential. We had 3.6 million acres of corn unplanted at the middle of June, per NASA's number in the June acreage figure. It's about 300,000 more than a year ago, and in line. I mean, it's a small percentage compared to with the acreage jump that we've seen. But when you look at days conducive to field work in the states where the corn crop wasn't planted, when you look at farmer sentiment, when you look at margins, when you look at all of these things, I would argue that the risk is greater this year than others, that a portion of those acres did not get planted. And that is not anything that the market is paying attention to. Could it be a 185 on reduced acres? It's there, so just let's
Right.
see. It's early yet to get too cocky about things, as someone who got cocky about market moves in August of 2020. You know what I mean? Like, I was pretty certain I knew what was going to happen next, and I did not, and it was nasty. It was not fun. So just be really careful that you don't assume everything is made and all of this is solid and check out, because that is a tendency that we have this time of year to do. Like, oh, it's done, everything is solid, only to get hit in the face with a shovel later on. Lastly, you know, we've got to watch what's going on between
Yeah.
Russia and Ukraine. Putin is kind of like, yo, I don't like these threats from Trump, but I kind of am going to call his bluff. My goals remain the same, and to be, you know, just to remind you guys, Putin's goal is to basically take over Ukraine and keep, you know, the EU and NATO and all these other things from growing with influence in the area. You know, I don't really think you're going to convince him to chill at this point. And so, what does that look like? What is Trump prepared to do? You know, we saw those threats last week at the tail end of the week, where he was going to send nuclear submarines to regions near Russia. You know, the market was just like, yeah, whatever, we don't care. You're still going to move food, blah blah blah. But I really, you know, feel like we're on the cusp of something that could be worse than what it was in the beginning. And honestly, like, if Putin's going to continue to push Trump, what, you know, like I said, what happens there? We're also seeing some reduced crop ideas, not from the Ukrainian government. They raised their wheat estimate today, which everyone's like, what? But you know, you are hearing some concern there and some of these other things. So we'll definitely be watching. Also watch China. There's been some pretty major flooding in parts, and then also some pretty extreme
Yeah.
heat and drought in others. Right now, wheat is really covering their nearby feed needs and things. Like, they're really putting it in there. You're seeing, you know, more demand for meal and some of these other things. They've had low clearance levels for their corn. Corn prices have been under pressure. But I'm really going to be watching, you know, as we get closer to harvest, to see, you know, what's going on, because we also have there, pretty much like everywhere, we have this idea that we have this massive production coming and lackluster demand. And I would say the demand is anything but lackluster, and the production is far from being guaranteed and put in the bin. But yeah, yeehaw, giddy up, happy first week of August.
Awesome. Angie, thank you so much, especially as you are on your vacation. I appreciate it. I know our listeners do as well. But thank you so much for taking the time to still do these. Listeners, as always, thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate you. And yeah, whatever you're doing, stay safe, keep it tight, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Much love.
See you tomorrow, guys. Have a good one.